Welcome to another lecture. Let's begin with a structural overview. Today we examine The Last House, a 2026 science fiction thriller that confines us, quite deliberately, to a single suburban domicile while hinting at planetary upheaval outside. I am Alexei, and in this context we will move from definitions to evidence to inference, with a little dry humor where the data allow.
Hi, I'm Priyanka, and I help Professor Alexei with research and teaching. I'm, excited to talk about a film that feels small inside the house, but very large in what it implies outside.
Before we get to the complexities, it's important to understand the premise in plain terms. The Last House follows the Delgado family in suburban Seattle, who become mysteriously sealed inside their home during an unusual storm. Doors, windows, even the floors are effectively impassable. Communications fail, and we observe that strange creatures appear when it rains. The narrative is fundamentally about surviving months that become years in a closed system.
In simpler terms, it is a survival story in a locked room the size of a house. Food, water, light, medicine, and morale are all rationed. And every time it rains, the outside is not only dangerous, it is almost unreadable.
Scientifically speaking, or at least in the film's speculative register, we have a water-based barrier of unknown composition encasing the structure, rain-activated organisms exhibiting tentacular morphology, and an environment trending toward long-term inundation. The film, that is to say, withholds etiological detail. Instead, it models a closed-loop ecology indoors, indoor agriculture, water reclamation, and low-protein supplementation via trapping, subject to catastrophic failure through contamination events.
So academically, we could call it claustrophobic sci-fi. It uses a contained space to magnify risk, and the unknowns outside are variables the family can't measure directly. We see inference under uncertainty becoming a daily practice.
Why does this matter now? We observe in our era renewed interest in resilience under isolation, resource scarcity, and disrupted information channels. The film's relevance lies in its demonstration that routines, redundancy, and psychological scaffolding are as vital as any toolkit. It also reminds us that explanations, while comforting, are not a prerequisite for action.
It makes me wonder about the historical habit in disaster films of explaining everything with a lab scene or a news montage. Here, they choose not to. The misunderstanding, maybe, is thinking that clarity equals hope, whereas the Delgados find hope by building systems without clarity.
Precisely. To ground our discussion moving forward, some basic facts. The Last House is directed by Louis Leterrier, written by Matthew Robinson, and released by Netflix in August 2026. Greta Lee portrays Anne, who drives the indoor agriculture. Wagner Moura plays Jason, an out-of-work engineer who, as it were, constructs the water systems and defensive measures. Critics widely regarded their performances as the film's emotional ballast.
Let's consider the chronology. Day 0. Jason hurries home as a storm approaches. It rains. Doors and windows refuse to open. Connectivity dies. Neighbors are trapped too. Some are stranded outside. The family quickly rations and creates activities so the children do not spiral into panic.
Following weeks bring self-reliance. Anne starts a vegetable garden indoors. Jason builds a water reclamation system. Ruth, one of the children, reports a creature in the rain that seems almost friendly. Initially, this is dismissed. Approximately 2 months in, a neighbor named Susan appears and is attacked during rainfall, after which the family institutionalizes a strict hide during storms protocol. A fallen chimney cap creates a narrow vertical aperture, useful for observation and traps but not for egress.
One of the starkest choices follows. The family dog Cassidy grows ill. With no medicine, Jason euthanizes him. The remains are frozen and later used to bait small animal traps, paired with their vegetables. When the grid finally fails, everything amps up in difficulty. Daylight sets the workday, storage gets risky.
Approximately 5 years on, the house has become a greenhouse with a hydrological backbone. Then, a tentacled seawater dripping creature infiltrates, fails to locate them, but contaminates their crops and water. The agent, saline, toxin, or biofilm, remains undefined. Ruth hypothesizes an oceanic origin and a kind of planetary reclamation. A ferret bite infects Ruth. To obtain antibiotics, Anne navigates sewage pipes to a neighbor, Max Richardson, encountering a creature en route. Subsequent rains force water up through the plumbing, corralling the family into the attic. They trap a creature. Crucially, they spare it at Ruth's urging.
In response, the creature opens the front door and signals to others. The family is spared. Almost immediately, the house collapses into a sinkhole. When the rain lets up, Seattle is largely submerged. They salvage a boat, discover other survivors, and the story shifts from stasis to uncertain mobility.
It is worth noting a few production elements. Principal photography began in April 2025, primarily at Shepperton Studios in England. Controlled interiors and waterwork were evidently decisive. The project was first announced in May 2024, under the working title 11817, with Kingsley Ben-Adir initially attached before Wagner Moura joined in January 2025 as Netflix acquired the film. Marketing included a quietly theatrical stunt in Los Angeles, a furnished billboard at Sunset and Selma, with a robe-clad performer communicating via whiteboard and binoculars. Critical reception was mixed. The Hollywood Reporter praised claustrophobic tension, but found a loss of momentum. RogerEbert.com rated it 1.5 out of 4, NME 2 out of 5. Empire and The Guardian landed around 3 out of 5, noting it as modestly diverting and sized for streaming.
So yeah, moving on. That gives us the contours. It feels like a lab for resilience, which, Professor, I know you tend to find personally fascinating.
Indeed. In conclusion to this preliminary phase, my connection is straightforward. Under duress, cognition narrows unless we deliberately scaffold it. The Delgados construct routines that keep executive function available for hard choices. As researchers, we can infer that resilience is a practiced competence, not a personality trait bestowed by the muse. Let's proceed to the next point. We will consider 3 questions. First, a historical, or better, narratological question about withholding causes. Second, a counterfactual scenario. Third, an open question about the creature's behavior. Each illuminates a different dimension of how the film organizes uncertainty. To frame our discussion of the first, the film chooses not to explain the origin of the barrier, the creatures, or the flood, even as we observe consistent symptoms. This is not an omission by accident. It is a design that displaces exposition with process and relationship.
Professor, why do you think the filmmakers chose not to explain the disaster?
Arguably 2 reasons. First, thematically, the film is about the phenomenology of confinement. The unknown functions as a constant pressure, keeping us inside the epistemic boundaries of the house. Second, structurally, withholding cause preserves dread across multiple years of story time. If the script delivered a neat ideological packet in Act 1, we would shift from survival to mission. By refusing that pivot, the narrative keeps attention on ingenuity, routine, and family dynamics. Critics who preferred hard science found this frustrating. Others accepted the terms of the experiment.
Professor, could you clarify the impact on audience engagement? Does not knowing make us more attentive, or does it, exhaust patience over time?
Both effects are observable. Initially, uncertainty is an attractor. We scan details, we hypothesize. Over long duration, if new data do not recalibrate our hypotheses, some viewers experience entropy of interest. The film counters this by shifting to process, gardening, trapping, water systems, and by staging moral inflection points. In literary terms, it invites what Keats termed negative capability, the capacity to abide unresolvedness. Not all audiences want that invitation on a Friday night, and the reviews reflect as much. Let's transition to another aspect, the counterfactual. The family traps a creature and chooses mercy at Ruth's urging. The creature reciprocates by opening the door and signaling others. A small act, but with maximal consequence.
Professor Alexei, what if they had killed the creature instead?
Counterfactually, we can infer a grim trajectory. The barrier remains until external geophysical shifts or creature behavior changes. The house is already structurally compromised. Flood pressures are rising. Without that moment of interspecies détente, the family likely remains immobilized until the sinkhole event, at which point survival odds collapse. The film's own logic suggests that mercy is not merely ethical ornament. It is instrumental to exit.
And the significance of mercy. Is the message that empathy is a survival tool, not just, a virtue we like to quote on posters?
Yes, and we can formalize it. In game theoretic terms, the Delgados face an iterated interaction with an opaque agent under asymmetric power. Violence risks escalation with unknown retaliation patterns. Mercy, in this singular instance, functions as a costly signal that can be recognized across species even absent shared language. The response, door opening, signaling others, reads as reciprocal de-escalation. The film posits empathy as a strategy for unlocking coordination when traditional force is failing. On to our next point, the open question. What are these creatures and what do their actions tell us? The evidence, tentacles, seawater dripping, activity correlated with rainfall, ability to manipulate built environments, and at least one instance of what looks like group coordination.
Professor, could the creature's behavior suggest a form of communication?
It's crucial to understand the ambiguity. Door opening and signaling may indicate intentionality and social structure. Alternatively, we might be observing learned association or even mimicry without semantic depth. Ruth's oceanic reclamation hypothesis is a reasoned inference, given the flooded Seattle and saline traces, but it is not confirmed. The film withholds adjudication, leaving us oscillating between sentience and stimulus response. As scientists would say, the data set is insufficient. Nonetheless, proximate behaviors hint at a minimal protocol for co-presence.
From a different angle, what are the implications for human-animal relations in extreme conditions? If we treat unknown beings as communicative by default, do we risk misreading? If we treat them as hostile by default, do we foreclose cooperation?
This then brings us to method. We need protocols for interacting with nonverbal, non-familiar agents under high stakes. Ethology, robotics, and crisis negotiation offer partial tools, seeking repeatable signals, distinguishing cheap talk from costly signals, and testing boundary behaviors with minimal exposure. The film's attic scene is a crude but telling pilot study. Reduce threat display, allow egress, observe cohort response. Further research, even in simulation, on cross-species signal detection under duress would be invaluable. Theoretically, it could inform not only fiction but disaster anthropology.
That was helpful to think through, actually. Maybe our instinct for certainty can be counterproductive when the signals are sparse.
To summarize, The Last House is a claustrophobic science fiction thriller about a family sealed inside their home during a mysterious global catastrophe, where survival depends on routines, improvisation, and ultimately an act of mercy. We examined three questions: why the film withholds causal explanation, what likely follows if mercy is denied, and whether the creature's behaviors constitute communication. For further study, consider other contained survival narratives that privilege process over spectacle. Compare how each manages mystery, resource cycles, and moral choice. Thank you for listening. Continue your studies, build good routines, and remember that unanswered questions are sometimes the most useful instruments we have.
Thank you, Professor. And thanks to everyone for joining us. Maybe that's something we can come back to later.